What's going on, Washington Commanders Nation? This is the latest and greatest from the Rambling with Rio YouTube channel, where we ramble about the Washington Commanders. Today, friend of the show and returning guest, actually my first ever guest on my YouTube channel a year ago, my guy, my #1 ranked draft pundit for the 4-letter network, my guy, Matt Miller. Welcome back to the show.
Man, that's a high praise, considering the team that I run with at ESPN. So I appreciate it. It's great to be back with you. We had a blast last time, so I'm excited to do it again.
Absolutely, man. It's been a crazy off season. Has it sunk in for you that Washington has a permanent name finally, or are we still calling them the football team or the Skins?
Man, I think it'll be one of those things where everyone always kind of messes it up. Like, I'm from Missouri, as you know. There are times I will still say the St. Louis Rams. And I probably will forever. It's going to take a while to get used to it. So, but I noticed you got all the new gear on. It looks clean. I think that's going to help, having stuff that people want to wear, want to represent. But I will tell you, I was reading something the other day and it said Commanders. It didn't say Washington Commanders. It just said Commanders. And it threw me off. I was like, wait, what? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. So it's going to be a minute.
It's definitely it's an adjustment period, but like I'm in a realm where I'm always around the team and I'm always talking about the team, so it's already stuck in with me. We're 6 months removed from the date of changing the name on 2/22. I'm just ready to watch some football at this point. The gear, the aesthetic, the branding, it looks nice. They got to win some football games. And at the end of the day, that's what it's going to be. How's the ESPN treating you right now, man? How are you settling into your gig there? And what's the draft process look like during the draft off season?
Yeah, it's crazy because I think that's like a good way to put it. When, I worked at Bleacher Report for 10 years before ESPN, and this is no fault of their Bleacher Report, but it's a smaller cast of characters who are providing content. At ESPN, one of the first things I noticed is there are 4 draft analysts, not just one, but there's an NFL team, there's a college football team. Whereas at Bleacher Report, for football, it was really a small group of us creating a lot of the content, especially video podcast content. So it's been kind of crazy to have a break for the first time. You and I were talking off camera. I actually moved this summer, which having time to do things like that has been nice, but it's also it's kind of weird. So I've been watching as much film as I possibly can, especially on this upcoming quarterback class, because I do think it's going to drive a lot of the conversation. With 4, 5, 6 guys who are probably going to have early top 50 grades. So it's been nice to shift down a little bit, but like you said, I'm so ready for football to get going. We're so close. It's that time of year where like you walk outside in the morning and it reminds you of going to August practices. There's like that dew in the grass, the heat in the air, and you're like, God, it's almost football season. I can feel it. It's almost here.
Hell yeah, man. I'm going for morning runs. It smells like a football morning. Like it's right. That time of year for sure. But speaking of too early quarterback talks for the 2023 draft, we know about Stroud and Young. I think those are going to be the 2 headliners going into the college season next year. What other guys fill out that top 5 of the quarterbacks that fans should be looking out for in this upcoming season?
Yeah, those are definitely the top 2, household names, especially being Heisman finalists, Bryce winning the Heisman, playing at Alabama and Ohio State respectively. That doesn't hurt, right? But I do think that there are guys like Will Levis at Kentucky who really played well last year. He just has to cut down on the turnovers. And that might sound like, oh, well, if only he could cut down on the turnovers, right? But we generally in college, we see that happen. Remember Zach Wilson, his final year at BYU? Cut down on the turnovers. He became the #2 pick in the draft. So it's not unprecedented. I think Tyler Van Dyke at Miami is someone who's really interesting to watch because last year he unseats D'Eriq King. I think a lot of people forgot how a year ago how excited college football was for D'Eriq King to be at Miami. Tyler Van Dyke takes his job from him and just goes on this run. I think he started 9 games and played exceptionally well. So you've seen kind of the glimpses from Tyler and you want to see, okay, can he build on that? Not only did he play well, but now he has Mario Cristobal as his head coach. He has Josh Gaddis coming down from Michigan as his offensive coordinator. Will Mallory at tight end. And they've got some dudes down there at Miami. And I think for the first time in a long time, there's some real optimism about that program. And Tyler's definitely a huge part of that. So I think those are probably the 4 names that you have to start with But man, like I said, there are so many quarterbacks that you have to watch.
That
Anthony
BYU
Richardson
kid
at
is
Florida,
someone I'm looking at
Jerron
too.
Hall at BYU. Right, exactly. So it's just like there are so many guys where Jerron Hall, who you brought up, is a great one because he's a little bit older, he's a little undersized. He just needs to stay healthy. He plays very well, and so I think that's one of the keys with him is, hey, let's see what happens this year because BYU was actually fairly loaded this year as well. The offensive line looks good, so there are a lot of guys, and everyone's going to have their guy that's like, oh my God, I can't believe you didn't mention so and so, like Leary from North Carolina State. It's like we could spend an hour running through the list of quarterbacks that are like viable NFL players. Last year, we knew not only was it a down year at the top, but we knew it was a down year in terms of depth. Like there weren't that many quarterbacks drafted last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one big change for this year. Not just that there's Bryce Young and CJ Stroud potentially, but that the depth of the quarterback class is really good as well.
And am I fair to assume that you got Stroud number one on that board right now? Because that's number one for me.
Yeah, right now, I'm glad that people are starting to say right now and understand that things are going to change and that they could change fast, but I think Stroud, the size difference is big. I remember working with Chris Sims, who taught me so much about quarterback play in our conversations. And I remember him saying, size is a trait. And I was like, it is, and it's not one that you have to have, but it helps, right? When all things are equal, it helps. And I think being 6'3", 215, as opposed to being maybe 6 foot and 190 pounds for Bryce Young, it's a big advantage for CJ Stroud. I also loved that last year, like week 1, week 2, he was struggling. And then you go through the season and we see him just get better each week up to the point where you're playing Utah and you're just hanging it on them. Unstoppable but without Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, without your 2 top 15 picks at wide receiver, you still go out and dominate. So I'm excited to break those guys down. Ohio State has a tough schedule this year. There'll be a lot of really good matchups to see what CJ can do.
Hell yeah, and he did himself more than a justice by throwing at their pro day, because it went from guys going to see the receivers to getting a very early peak. Like he got like a pre-pro day in a year before. Like, man.
I had a tweet about this. I swear there were some scouts who were at that pro day and they were texting me like, CJ Stroud's the best quarterback we've seen this draft process. Like we throw him in with all the quarterbacks, Kenny Pickett, all those guys. Maybe this isn't a surprise to us now because we saw how the league valued those players. But I'll tell you, in March, when you're getting tagged saying CJ Stroud's the best quarterback that I've seen this draft process, it definitely made some waves.
Hell yeah. And speaking of this year's quarterback class, man, did the league shit on this year's quarterback class. We had 1 first rounder. All the rest of the guys shot way down the list. Even our guy that we took in the top of the 5th round, Sam Howell. How weird was it seeing this year play out, or did you expect it? Because, usually there's the chatter that it's not a quarterback draft and stuff like that, but someone usually gets thirsty and comes up the board. The league really just sat back and said, no, we're not doing that shit this year. Like, how'd you feel watching it play out?
No, I was surprised. I really was. It was funny, Rio, because every time I would be on like NFL Live, we'd talk about quarterbacks and be like, guys, here's the thing. These quarterbacks aren't good, but we expect the league to overdraft them. And so all your predictions are based on, hey, the league's going to overthink this. So I was surprised, but I was also incredibly proud of NFL teams that they didn't panic. They didn't overdraft. We saw that. I think we saw that in this draft at some positions, but we didn't see it at quarterback. And so I give the league a tip of the cap to they didn't press, which we expected. I remember saying so many times EJ Manuel, this would be the EJ Manuel draft all over again, where the Bills reached on a guy because they needed one and there wasn't anybody else, right? So I think that it does show that the NFL is being creative. We saw a record number of veteran quarterbacks traded this offseason, which I think definitely showed early kind of how teams saw this. And then, when Seattle doesn't take a quarterback, when Detroit doesn't take a quarterback, I think that's when you kind of perk up and you're like, oh, okay, that's how everybody sees this class. So now it's on those guys that'll prove us all wrong. To see Desmond Ridder push Marcus Mariota in Atlanta or to see what Malik Willis can become in Tennessee. I think that now becomes the fun part. Or you mentioned Sam Howell, who a year ago we would have been on this show talking about Sam Howell as potentially the top quarterback.
Yep, hell yeah. It's crazy, man. It's crazy how that all played out. And we get an early sneak peek at the rookies on August 13th. We got the Panthers in town. We got Howell versus Corral to open the preseason in our first inaugural game as the Commanders here in a couple weeks. I'm excited to see how this draft class plays out because everyone should have a ginormous chip on their shoulder at this point. How did you rate Sam Howell, and where did you see him being taken in the draft this year?
Yeah, I had him, I want to say at QB 5 or 6. He was like right there for either one. I had him graded as a day 3 quarterback, but not round 5. I really did not think he would slip that far because there weren't any off-field issues. There weren't any injury issues. It was just a guy who, had a great year in 2020, kind of came back to earth in 2021, but I didn't think he played as poorly as some of the reputation that he got. He also lost a ton around him. With Diami Brown and Daz Newsome being gone, with Javonte Williams and Michael Carter being gone, the offense really changed. And so I didn't think he played as poorly as some of the things you heard about him. But I saw him in person a couple times, and he spins the ball well for a smaller guy. I think some of the Baker comparisons, he's not that athletic as Baker, especially going back to college, where he's not going to give you that escapability or the creative factor when things break down. But I think, in the structure of the offense, he can play in the NFL, and it's going to be exciting to see. I like Taylor Heineke as a backup quarterback. I think that's the kind of guy you want in your room. But I wouldn't be shocked if Sam starts to push him out a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely see it. I've been to camp twice now, and I've got to see it up close. Howell gets the ball out. Mind you, it's verse 3s. He gets the ball out of his hands faster than Wentz and Heineke. Definitely Heineke, though. Heineke takes forever. But he rips it. It looks crazy because it looks like he has Wentz's arm on a Heineke but more stocky body. And it looks crazy. Madden's giving him a 93 throw power, and it looks every bit of the part in person. I'm excited to see him cook. Hopefully, if things work out with the guy we traded for, we will not have to see this guy play, and we can pull a Jimmy Garoppolo type situation and flip him. Or one day he's going to be the guy, or he's going to have the chance to be the guy. We'll see. Washington trots out a couple quarterbacks a year. What do you feel about the Wentz acquisition in D.C.?
I'm not a Wentz guy, I'll be honest. I think for me, it's hard to see a guy on his third, opportunity where so much of it's mental. It's not that his body's breaking down. It's truly, the mental aspect of the game. And more so, it's not even decision-making. It's almost just like the flow of the game, the confidence of the game. Last year, before he got COVID, he was playing great. He had cut down on the interceptions that got him run out of Philly. He was moving the offense effectively. Guy, gets COVID, and, he was pretty outspoken about not being vaccinated. And I think that's where you're in a playoff run and your franchise quarterback gets sick with something that, maybe could have been prevented. I think he lost a lot of support in the locker room and in the front office at that time. Where are your stances on that, right? It's not for me to say, but I think he did lose some support in the front office at that point. And when you play like he did against Jacksonville, you've kind of got 2 strikes, right? And so I think they came to a point where you either have to commit to a player in that situation or move on. And they made the decision to move on. Now, the key for Washington, you guys obviously have a fantastic head coach, Ron Rivera. You've got a good structure there. You've got a decent enough offensive line. I think they can protect Carson. That's always a big key. But I think having a strong run game behind him, like we saw in Indy, will help. With Antonio Gibson back there, you guys drafted Brian Robinson out of Alabama, who I'm a big fan of. Yes, so I think some of the key is to not put it all on Carson, to let him almost do what he did in Indy last year, where, he's 60% of the offense instead of 75 or 80% of it. But this is his chance, man, his last chance. And I think he knows that if he doesn't hit it this year, then his chances to start in the league are going to be few and far between, because 3 teams in 3 years for a former number 2 overall pick is unprecedented when you don't have like Ryan Leaf's personality,
Yeah,
and Carson's not a bad guy.
he's a nice dude.
It's
That's the crazy part, man.
Yeah.
He's a nice ass guy.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, if I were in the Washington Commanders front office, I wouldn't be buying a house based on Carson Wentz. I think I'd still be renting because he's just not someone that I feel like has proven what we've seen the last 3 years that he can be your long-term guy, but he's definitely better than what Washington has had in a long time. And the potential is certainly better than what Washington's had in a long time.
Indeed. And I would say it would be fair to assume that this is probably the best assortment of weapons throughout the roster that he's played with in quite some time, possibly his whole time in the league. We drafted Jahan Dotson with the 16th pick of the draft, who looks like personality-wise, work ethic-wise, like a clone of Terry McLaurin, who I will give y'all credit over at Stick to Football. You guys used to beat the drum for Scary Terry when all he was being talked about was as a special teams gunner. He was supposed to be the Matthew Slater of that draft class, and you guys kept saying, I see something with him. I see that working out. He gets his bag. Carson gets Terry Dotson, and knock on wood, if Curtis Samuel is safety, and we get something out of De'Ami Brown this year, that's a wide receiving core he has no excuse to be producing with, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think even, Logan Thomas at tight end, if he's healthy, can be, we've seen, for a former quarterback, this dude has been a weapon at tight end. I mentioned the running backs and J.D. McKissick comes back right after almost leaving. So it's definitely the deepest crew I think he's had in quite some time. I mean, there's no Jonathan Taylor here. That might be a difference maker. But, Terry is such a dynamic weapon. And I think, honestly, it matches up really well with what Carson does well. His arm strength, you mentioned it earlier, it's there. Like, he can push the ball down the field. He can create because of his athleticism. And with Terry and Jahan, you have elite speed, guys who very few defenders can even pretend to keep up with. And so hopefully we do see them open it up and air it out a little bit to take advantage of that. And then, like you said, you have Curtis underneath. You have De'Ami, hopefully getting it in the mix underneath as well. So it's an offense that you can get pretty excited about going 4 wide. And then when you have running backs like Gibson who catch the ball as well as any running back in the league, you've got a ton of weapons there. But, I mean, as you know, the offensive line is going to be the key. Losing Brandon Scherf is probably better for the salary cap long term, but it's still going to be something that you have to look at this year. I'm excited to see Sam Cosmi at right tackle and see kind of what his future is, because that might be your eventual left tackle. So
he's
going to get a longer look. Yeah.
He's going to be the guy for sure. Ron he brought a couple familiar faces that he coached back in Carolina with Andrew Norwell and Trey Turner coming in to compete for the left and right starting spots there. But yeah, the line is the key. And there's tight end we drafted in the 5th round out of Nevada, Cole Turner. He's been turning heads as the start of camp because Logan Thomas and Chase, they're on the pup list right now. So they're on the side field every day. The tight end we drafted last year, John Bates, he's missed the first week. So Cole Turner's got all of the number 1 reps as the tight end, and he looks comfortable and he looks ready in that role. And he looks like a good red zone target. He high points the football well. How did you rate Cole Turner coming out of Nevada?
Yeah, I saw him in person at the Senior Bowl and really liked him. I started bumping him up there. I thought he had a really good pre-draft process. I had him as an early day 3 pick. So they got a little bit of a value in round 5, I believe, where they picked him up. But you mentioned it. His athleticism definitely shows up. And I think in the red area where he has some size and he definitely has that ability to extend, it is going to be noticeable. Now, coming out of that offense in Nevada, it's just going to be about acclimating to the route tree in the NFL. I think it's going to be the biggest key for him is expanding that to where he's not, just a jump ball guy, or he's not just a safety valve, but someone that can actually push the seam, can create some problems for safeties and linebackers. But I definitely think the traits are there. And I liked him coming out. We talked about it wasn't a great quarterback class. It wasn't a great tight end class either. Even though it was deep, there wasn't, necessarily there was no Kyle Pitts this year, right? There maybe wasn't even a TJ Hawkinson. So getting Cole in the 5th round, I mean, I'm with you. I definitely think that you have someone that could become a starter. And because of the injuries that you mentioned, it might be sooner rather than later.
Hell yeah. And to wrap up the draft talk for our class of 2022, first ever Commanders class, which is crazy. There's so many firsts this year with the rebrand and everything. We drafted this safety, Percy Butler out of Louisiana. When the pick was called, I'm not even going to lie, I didn't even know who it was, man. Give me something about Louisiana safety Percy Butler. I call him Master P because he's like the only black guy named Percy I've ever heard of in my life, man.
Man, if you've seen him at camp, you know he's fast. I think that's the first thing that I noticed. But he was also incredibly productive. I think he was a second team all conference last year, 3-year starter. And he was one of those guys that actually played kind of in a diverse scheme, what they were asking him to do, whether it's free safety, but he can also he can come down and play in the box some. And for, not being the biggest guy, I think he was right at 195 pounds when he came out. Like that was huge watching him. Okay, like he's going to walk down and play in the box. So he's a hitter that has 4.3 speed. And, despite the fact that he's coming out of a smaller conference, smaller school, yeah, I think he has potential to play. Now, it might be a third safety, might be some special teams right out of the gate. The one thing we haven't really seen from him is being able to flip the field. I think he only had one interception last year. Might have only had one the last couple of years, but he's definitely an impact player as an open field tackler. There weren't many safeties in the draft last year that were better than him.
I love to hear it, man. I love a glowing endorsement on guys that we take on day 3 of the draft. But yep. I know before we go, I got to hit you with a couple questions. I know you're like a split Chiefs-Niners fan. What is the process and the growth of Trey Lance as QB1 in San Francisco looking like? And what is life after Tyreek Hill? How's it going for my guy, Patty Mahomes over there in Kansas City, man?
Yeah. Now, I got to tell you, I'm not a Chiefs fan. Just my whole family is. I'm the only one who's not. So my wife, my kids, my friends. So I'm stuck in this bubble of Chiefs fans. And the Super Bowl a couple of years ago was difficult for us as a group. I can tell you that. So it was not – I was the only one root for the Niners. And to lose it the way they did, I'm still a little bitter about it. So Trey Lance, I haven't been to camp. Obviously, being in Missouri, can't be to California. But I've heard ups and downs, talking to even some of the players on the team. It's like there are moments where he looks like, oh, my God, this guy's going to be amazing. And then there are times where, you can tell he's still a young player. Also, man, he's a young player who's barely played football in 2 years. He had the one game that final year at North Dakota State. He played a couple games last year. But he hasn't played meaningful football in almost 2 years. So there's going to be some rust there. We've heard things about arm fatigue, where if he throws a ton one day, he might be a little bit sore, not be able to throw as much the next day. So I think he's almost like still working himself back into QB1 shape in terms of his arm
conditioning.
And that's expected, right? You expect that. So I think with Trey, it's going to be a roller coaster. You're going to see the running ability is fantastic. It's going to be, I hope, it's going to be used early. It's something that Kyle gets working into the offense, but the arm strength is certainly there, especially on intermediate stuff. I think on the deep ball, that was something he had to work on a little bit with his placement. But, I'm excited. We talked about Washington's supporting cast. San Francisco's supporting cast is pretty damn good. With George Kittle healthy, Deebo Samuel back in the game now, he and Terry both got paid. So hat tip to Tory Dandy for getting those guys taken care of. And then, Brandon Ayuk is out of the doghouse unless he keeps trying to fight Fred Warner in training camp. But I think, and with San Francisco, they're going to be able to run the ball. Great offensive line, obviously. So Trey's got a good situation that he's coming into. Life after Tyreek Hill is going to be interesting. I think the line from the corporate line in Kansas City is that your diversity is going to be better, that it's going to be harder for defenses to stop this offense when they have to worry about more players than two, right? More than just Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. So adding a Sky Moore in the second round, signing Juju Smith-Schuster, who's had a very good camp, getting MVS from Green Bay. I know people are very excited about, especially, down here, just having bigger receivers because Tyreek, as great as he is at the jump ball, is undersized. And also, I think people have come around to the idea that you have a wide receiver who's getting close to 30, whose primary attribute is speed. And that's one of the first things that is going to eventually go is that, stop-start ability, that burst. Is rare for wide receivers to produce after the age 30. It's something that I don't think is talked about enough. There are exceptions like Larry Fitzgerald, but not many. We've seen Julio Jones go from being dominant to being kind of forgotten about. He signs with Tampa, and people are like, "Oh, okay, cool."
Cool.
It wasn't a huge story, right? So
he's all of a sudden going to look not washed now that he's with Tampa, though. He's going to come back and look.
That's how it goes. It's right. But I do think in Kansas City, it might be a situation where they take a step back to take a couple of steps forward. To get the cap health right, to get, I think, some of the balance and spending figured out. But also, losing Tyrann Mathieu as a leader in the secondary is going to be felt. I'm a big Justin Reed fan. I loved that signing. Oh, yeah. But it's definitely going to be a different look for this team, who I think from left tackle to right guard, it's the best offensive line in football. The right tackle spot has still been figured out. And you have, in my opinion, still the best quarterback in football. So those pretty good recipes when you have the best quarterback, the best tight end, and 4/5 of the best offensive line, and Andy Reid calling plays. You're still in a pretty good spot.
Oh, yeah. I still envision them somehow getting to the AFC Championship at minimum, possibly getting back to the Super Bowl. And speaking of the Super Bowl, we're going to close it out with this. I want a Washington record prediction for 2022 and a Super Bowl prediction. Don't got to pick the winner, but give me the two teams that represent both conferences and we can sign out.
Yeah, man, I've been asked the Super Bowl one a couple times, and I keep picking different teams, I think. So I'll go there first. I know I'm picking the Bills to win. Now, who they're going to play against is tough, but I'm going to go Bills over the Bucks. That's the matchup I think I just want to see. I'm being selfish, picking the one I want to see. Now, for Washington, I ran through this a couple weeks ago looking at their schedule, and I had them coming out 7-10. I know that's probably not what people want to hear, but I'll say this about the East. The East could turn on us it could flip completely this year. The defense, I think, is going to have to carry you a little bit, and we know they're capable. So, got to get Chase Young going at full speed and having him live up to some of the expectations. If that happens, this linebacking crew could be fantastic. There's obviously playmakers in the secondary. So we'll see, man. It's going to be wild. Lots riding on Jalen Hurts in Philly. I think we're all curious to see what Dallas is going to look like, because Dallas, this is what they always do. And then the Giants are going to be terrible. So you at least have that. You have that going for you. The Giants.
We're all pretty sure on that part, man. I like
there's two wins right there.
Coach pairing they got. Don't like the team they got at all.
Big Brian Dable guy. Joe Shane's very good evaluator. I liked the draft class a lot. Daniel Jones. That's the thing for me. It's just, man, Daniel Jones. So it's going to be fun to watch. I think the East has, a ton of young players, like Kayvon Thibodeau with the Giants. You guys obviously getting Dotson. Every team has that one young player that you can get pretty excited about watching.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be really interesting to see what Dak is like post Cooper, especially with their receiver room a little hampered by injuries right now. But I appreciate you coming on with me today, man. Let folks know where they can find you, about your site, and we can get out of here, man.
Yeah, man, people can follow me on Twitter at NFL Draft Scout, or really anywhere, any social media. You can follow me at NFL Draft Scout. And you can find me on ESPN doing NFL draft work, probably a little bit of college football stuff this season as well. It's going to be a good time.
Absolutely, man. I miss the stick to football days, man. Whenever you decide you can do another tailgate tour, make your way down to Washington, or wait till we get our new venue in a few years and come to that one, and we can make it a fucking party. That's all I got for right now. Appreciate you, Matt.
Of course, man. Hey, I went to a Nationals game a couple years ago and had those district cooler things. Mm-hmm. So if there's a tailgate with those district coolers, I'm at it. You just let me know.
Hell yeah, man. Dan, you said the Nationals, and it triggered me because we traded our best player yesterday, and
we could go another 30 minutes. He's my favorite player in baseball who's not a Kansas City Royal and gets traded to the Padres. I got to hear about it from Daniel Jeremiah now. It's terrible. It's terrible. But I'm excited for Juan to hopefully be on a contender now.
Hey, good for him, man. But that's all I got for right now. That's DC Sports in a nutshell. Till next time, hail to the Washington Commanders. Out.